how did they manage to take 117 drones which were first person view. Now, first person view means the drones have a camera in front of the nose and they relay the picture back to the operator, and they simultaneously have artificial intelligence incorporated.
I think there are lessons for everybody, including India. What makes these drones deadly, and especially I'm talking about these quadcopters or small drones, is that they're low cost option.
Trump is only interested in the mineral wealth of Ukraine. He is not interested in Zelensky. He is not interested in Putin. He is, except that he made a statement when he took over power that in 24 hours I'm going to stop this war, and he's not been able to stop.
He hasn't been able to do it. Is Russia trapped in Ukraine's spiderweb? Who's actually behind Ukraine's drone attack? Hitting Russia within Russia? Is this Russia's Pearl Harbor, as Vladimir Zelensky says? Will the Istanbul peace talks lead anywhere? Hello, everyone. I'm Nina Gopal. This is Global Express, our weekly deep dive into matters that impact India and its neighborhood. As Prime Minister Narendra Modi makes his first visit to Jammu and Kashmir after the Pahalgam massacre and Operation Sindoor, inaugurating key railway links to the Vaishno Devi shrine, to tunnels and infrastructure projects, bridges across the Chenab as an alternative to the highways, this week we turn to one of the most audacious attacks on Russia by any country in recent history, Ukraine's Operation Spiderweb on June the 1st. Sunday's devastating explosive-laden drone attack by Ukraine caught Russia napping. This is Russia, India's most reliable ally. Satellite imagery shows Ukraine inflicted punishing damage on Russia's strategic bomber fleet at 5 separate airfields in Siberia and the Arctic, where Russia had moved its Black Sea fleet from its base in occupied Crimea after Ukraine had attacked Crimean bases with naval and aerial drones. Ukraine claims it damaged 41 airplanes at the Belaya, Olenya, and Dyagilevo and Ivanovo airbases, with over 100 quadcopters, which are small drones fitted with bombs. One of the targets was reportedly an A-50, which provides airborne early warning of incoming threats. Among the 41 aircraft that were taken out were Russian Tupolev's Tu-95s, Tu-22s, the M3, and the Tu-160. Ukraine tried it again on Wednesday night. This time, Russia claims it shot down all the 29 drones that Ukraine had sent across the 3 regions. And Russia is now clearly bent on targeting Kiev. What is the actual military situation then on the ground? What is Ukraine's endgame? What is Russian President Vladimir Putin's endgame? And where is that going to leave the US, whom defense experts say, alongside NATO, provided the vital intelligence behind this drone strike? Which, at the end of the day, is that the end of the Istanbul talks also, which were held on June 2nd, a day after, which will again be limited, I think, to a limited prisoner exchange. Talking to us today are experts who can give us an insight into the Russian-Ukraine war, its impact on Europe, which is facing its biggest conflict since World War II, and to countries across the globe. Air Commodore Dr. Ashwinder Singh Behel is an ex-fighter pilot and a Vayu Sena Medal Gallantry recipient, a renowned educationalist with 42 years of experience in operations, academic, and research, particularly in aerospace and air power dynamics. His work on China's aerospace development and UAE warfare gives him an operational understanding of emerging threats and capabilities. Welcome, Air Commodore.
Thank you, ma'am, for calling me and making me come and attend your podcast, which is always so interesting.
I didn't give you a choice this time, did I? Also with us is Bharat Gopalswamy, a defense contractor based out of Abu Dhabi, the United Arab Emirates. Prior to this role, Bharat was director of the South Asia Center at the Atlantic Council in the United States. He's held senior positions in the public and private sector, focusing on defense and international security issues in the United States, South Asia, and the Middle East. He holds a PhD in aerospace engineering.
Thank you. Glad to be with you.
Also with us is Amit Kumar, research analyst with the Takshashila Institution's Indo-Pacific Studies program. His specific focus is China and security and geo-economic affairs in the Indo-Pacific. But in recent weeks, Russia naturally has piqued his interest. Welcome, Mr. Amit Kumar.
Thank you, Ms. Gopal, for having me. It's a pleasure.
My first question is to the Air Commodore. On Sunday, on June 1st, the attacks targeted at least four Russian military air bases, the furthest of which from Ukraine is the Belaya air base in the Siberian region of Irkutsk, around 4,850 kilometers, at 3,000 miles from Kiev. How did the Ukrainians penetrate so deep into Russia? Is what intrigues all of us, I think, who've been watching. What were the actual mechanics? Can you explain that to the viewer? How much help came from NATO supplied satellite data? Were there gaps in Russia's radar coverage?
Very nice question, Nina. First thing I will tell you, you mentioned Pearl Harbor. And yes, it had two similarities.
That's Zelensky's comment.
Absolutely. So it had two similarities. The first was surprise. Till then, the US was not in World War II. So it had to get in. And this was in December 1941. And second was kamikaze attacks. You know, these pilots came in, they didn't have fuel to go back. So they homed on to the battleships. Eight of them were either destroyed or damaged, and 188 aircraft were lost by the Americans, as well as four submarines were destroyed. So that is the kind of damage that was caused. But I'm not in agreement with Zelensky when he says that he's caused that kind of a damage. Because when he says 41 aircraft, which includes 40 bombers, the Americans have assessed it as about 10 to 12 which have been destroyed and about another 10 which have been hit and damaged. So the damage is still colossal because these are strategic bombers. But at the same time, it is not what Zelensky was saying. Perhaps it is half of what Zelensky had mentioned. The second issue to this is, how did they manage to take 117 drones which were first person view? Now, first person view means the drones have a camera in front of the nose and they relay the picture back to the operator, and they simultaneously have artificial intelligence incorporated where they compare the picture that is fed into the drone and the one that they are seeing, and either the operator designates, or in case the link is broken, then it homes on its own to the target. So they carried 117 such drones. The interesting part is this operation took 18 months and 9 days, more than 1.5 years to plan and execute. And what they did, they smuggled these drones across to the Russian border, and there they put them into wooden containers and transported them on trucks. And the people who drove those trucks, the truckers, they didn't even know what was there inside. For them, it were modular homes, wooden modular homes that they were transporting. At the same time, there is one DJ who has been identified as a person who Artem, who was involved in this, as one of his trucks was also involved in transporting these drones. So these drones went to those 4 to 5 airfields, including Belaya, Olenya, and Ryazan. And Belaya was the furthest one. And Belaya is approximately, like you rightly mentioned, more than 4,300 kilometers. And just to give you a proportion of that distance, the distance from Delhi to Moscow is more than 4,300 kilometers. So, can you believe they transported all this without anybody coming to know? And this was complete intelligence failure on part of the Russians. And one of the places where they had positioned was very close to the FSB headquarters, which is the Intelligence and Security Agency of Russia. That is one aspect. But important thing here is that the truckers did not know. The Russians were involved. Some of the Russians were involved in this, meaning that there are a lot of Russian speaking Ukrainians in both Ukraine as well as in Russia. And that's why that DJ's name came about and his wife's name has come out, and they launched a manhunt. But Zelensky himself had said that all those who went in have come back. So probably he's already out and maybe in some different country. But the important issue here is also why there was no rear area security. You can, if you're putting all your eggs in one basket, just to give you an example, Belaya had 92 aircraft. Can you believe this? Out of which 30 were MiG 21s, but 52 were bombers, strategic bombers. And these were mostly Tu 22s, Tu 95, as well as Tu 160. And Tu 22 and Tu 95 are not being produced now anymore since the 1990s, so they cannot replace these aircraft, whereas Tu-160 is the only largest operational strategic bomber in the world. So most of these bombers carry air-launched cruise missiles and air-launched ballistic missiles, and that is why today, last night, Russians attacked with 407 drones and six ballistic missiles and about 38 cruise missiles onto Ukraine as a retaliation. But this is not the retaliation. It's not ended yet. The important aspect is that who provided them real time intelligence. Because, see, they positioned these trucks fine, but they knew when all the aircraft would be down. And when you see the images in Belaya, especially Belaya airfield, you find all the bombers and other transport aircraft like AN-12s are lined up on the tarmac. I mean, it's like telling all the eggs in your basket with no protection. And no protection, nobody is hitting at the drones. There is no firing taking place. There are no counter drone systems. There is no security visible at all when the attacks are taking place. So, irrespective of whether the total damage is 20 or less than 20 aircraft, the most important thing is that it was not exactly an aerial attack. Why? Because they had transported over 4,000 kilometers by trucks, initially smuggled and then trucks. And that it is more like a terror operation. It is more like an asymmetric warfare. So you cannot really call it an aerial warfare from Ukraine. It is taking the drones right till outside the air bases, then carrying out those strikes by remotely activating the roofs of the trucks, and the drones left off. Some of the truckers, when they saw this happen, they were so surprised they wanted to hit it with stones, but they couldn't do anything. The drones were flying at about 100 odd kilometers an hour and so quickly went on and crossed into the air bases. So, what my point here is, there is failure on the Russian side. They were taking it easy, and they were taking it easy. They did not have adequate measures for asymmetric to counter asymmetric means. And their rear area security, where they are putting all their key assets, thinking that it's 4,000 kilometers away or 4,300 or 800, and that nobody can come and hit them. That thing is gone. This is a learning lesson for India too. That if, thinking that
So,
we are going to.
Commodore, that's very interesting. So basically, to sum it up, you're saying that Russia was caught by surprise, and India has a huge learning curve to adopt as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Bharat Swami, what is your takeaway from this? Because Russia has used this time to deny damage. It says this is, it basically has sort of, there are videos, even though there are videos circulating online which show the drones emerging from the roof of one of the vehicles involved. There was even a lorry driver who was interviewed by the Russian state outlet RIA Novosti, where he says that he and the other drivers tried to knock down these drones flying out of these trucks with rocks. And he said they were in the back of the truck and we threw stones. But was there some kind of, you know, was Russia sort of blind? Did have was it blinded by this? Because I mean, this took 1.5 years, according to the Ukrainians, to put this whole operation together.
I think there is a bigger point here. Look, the Ukrainians have engineered such an attack, um, such a devastating blow to the Russians. So, is this an inspirational moment for the Europeans to further, strengthen their support to the Ukrainians? You have the Americans who are watching this from afar, because the whole Europe, ever since Trump assumed this presidency, the whole question of Ukrainian security and, by extension, European security, the fidelity of has been called into question. Now, Ukraine has demonstrated significant war-fighting capabilities, its ability to sustain and have the stamina and the stomach to put these kind of operations together. So, could we define this as one of the defining moments in um, in this whole war? About militarily speaking, where does this go after this? Where do we go? And ensure the Europeans are beefing up their security. There is still a little bit of time to come. The whole question today for the Europeans and the Ukrainians, what they would like to understand from Mr. Trump is a clear recognition of Russia as the provocator for this war. Okay, now that is what eagerly the Europeans and the Ukrainians are waiting. The Russian vulnerabilities have been, such as vulnerabilities in this whole mechanism, have been exposed in bits and pieces ever since the war has begun. You know, nobody thought the morale of the troops was low. The systems are not as robust as once they were. Russia is cut off, effectively cut off from the international market in terms of supplying in terms of supply for their ammunition and troops. So you have stories and reports of the the North Koreans and the Iranians supporting the Russians. So Russia has been effectively cut off from these kinds of things. So I think the big question here is, what does this movement trigger, and how? What are the, you have to wait and watch about how does this go towards, whether this goes towards peace agreement, or for that matter, where do one what are the next steps? And that's what most international observers are curious towards.
That's very interesting. Amit Kumar, you've been writing about Russia. What is your takeaway? Because, once these drones were launched, Russian defenses had very little time to react, because they bypassed border intelligence and all of that. But the cost to Russia, I mean, can they recover from it? Because the Ukrainians are saying that they've hit Russian aircraft worth $7 billion. And there's a gentleman called Fabian Hinz, who's a research fellow at the International Institute for Strategic Studies, who said that this is going to be very costly for Russia. So because most of these aircraft are not even in production. So how is that going to affect Russia's defenses and its ability now to it's held on to the battlefield. Everyone has praised Russia's, prowess on the battlefield. But, can it actually maintain the upper hand now on, attacking Kiev as
Yeah,
it's
see,
threatened to?
To grasp the gravity of this attack, I mean, one should understand the wide asymmetry that exists between the two militaries here, right? Russia is a military superpower with a huge and deep military industrial complex. It operates one of the largest fleet of aircrafts alongside the US and China. It has one of the world's most sophisticated technology when it comes to aircraft, submarines, missiles, air defense, etc., right, which are all battle hardened, right? It has vast resources and is the world's largest country by territory. And Ukraine is no match and is only a fraction of what Russia is, and would not have survived this long if not for the support from the West. On the other hand, Ukraine is not a military power. It has suffered a lot of losses, both in human power and in territory now. The aid from the US has not been somewhat what they would have liked after Trump has come in. And it doesn't have the moral support of the US under Trump. And when you put this in the background, what Ukraine has done, has been able to achieve, is nothing short of spectacular. It certainly is one of the most daring attacks it has carried out so far. Russia has denied damages, but independent assessments do point to a loss of about 12 to 20 aircrafts, some of them being damaged. But in tactical terms, Ukraine has been somewhat successful. In strategic terms, it needs to be seen. Now, coming to the question whether Russia can take these losses, I think there are various factors at play here that one has to account for to estimate whether Russia can take the losses. One, again, how many of the Russians bomber were actually bombed, and what are
Mhm.
the, and as mentioned, that
Ukraine claims they knocked off 41.
one third of their strategic bomber fleet, and they're not in production now. But with that comes the question of serviceability. I'm sure Russia has other assets that it can employ as bombers, but not all aircraft are in operation and battle ready simultaneously at all times. They need constant repair and maintenance work, And therefore, even if Russia manages to keep its serviceability as high as 70 and 80%, these losses would mean that the number of the pool will come down, and that will hamper operations. Now, the other question is with respect to economy, right? Russian economy was in tatters even before the war started, and with
Yeah,
the
that's
3 years,
right.
the war has already protracted for more than 3 years now, and this has taken a toll on economy. And the only way Russia can sustain its war efforts if it continues to divert the resources from other areas towards military and defense, and that will not go down well for other sectors within the economy, right? And keep in mind that it also has its foreign assets frozen, close to $300 billion by the West. So, given these situations, if you look at militarily, yes, they do have the assets to compensate for the losses, but then again, it will be a stress on both the military assets and then the economy not doing so well in the
Yeah.
war area for more than 3 years. This will create pressure. So this is not something which is to be taken very lightly, even from the Russian perspective.
There's a good point. Commodore, if I can bring you in, I didn't hear much of your first answer because we were not, I cut off, the internet was gone. But if I can just, Bharat, please don't move around so much.
Yes, sir.
Sorry. So, Commodore, if you could come in on the actual modus operandi of this covert operation. Everyone's calling it sheer genius, but how did they manage to penetrate? And did they use, someone said to me that they used Czech rebels to sort of get through the Russian, roads and to get to the points that they did. And the truck drivers had no idea that these were actually, they were carrying drones into such an area itself. So, I mean, Zelensky has said that, the people who assisted us were withdrawn from Russian territory. They're now safe. So it really looks like a covert operation. Is this because the Russians and the Ukrainians also share the same heritage, even though uh, it's not, widely, I suppose, perceived abroad? And how did Ukraine's spy chief, I
Now,
mean, this Lieutenant General Vasil Malik, get behind enemy lines, really?
Nina, a very good question. Though part of it was answered, I'll re-answer it again. The first thing is that 117 drones that the Ukrainians launched. It was a planned operation for 18 months and 9 days. So it was not done in one day. Secondly, they smuggled these drones. Now, the exact means, whether they used Chechen rebels or whether they used anybody else, nobody knows. As of this moment, it's all conjecture. How, unless Zelensky tells, or maybe later on when the picture becomes much more clearer, we'll come to know. But they were smuggled. So one thing we know, the drones were smuggled. Second is they were put on wooden containers, and those containers were made to look like modular homes. And these
Yes.
modular homes were transported on trucks, which the truckers who were driving them didn't know that these had drones inside hidden. And then they were transported over a distance of these 4,000 kilometers for Belaya, where the truckers stopped, and the remote, the roof of these containers were opened remotely, and thereafter the drones flew out. And when the drones flew out, the truckers were so surprised that they tried to throw stones and other things on them so as to hit at the drones, but they fly around 100 to 120 kilometers an hour. So they quickly crossed over and went towards the airbase, got inside, and now these drones are FPV, first person view drones, which have also
Hmm.
explosives inside it. And the camera that is there on the nose of the drone is relaying the picture to the operator, and it is telling him where what he's seeing on ground. And also it has artificial intelligence. If you see that fail safe is written over there, fail
That's
safe
right.
Failsafe means it's a critical safety feature which is there in this drone, that even if a line of sight breaks between the operator and the drone, or it is interrupted, then they can still home on to what has the imagery been fed as a target inside them, compare it
Commodore,
with what they are seeing, and then home on to those bombers. So
But
this is
Commodore,
how.
this is what I wanted to ask. I mean, this looks highly technical, even though they say it cost less than $2,000 per drone, and it was as compared to what they wiped out. What makes these drones different? Because it really looks as if Kiev has been adapting and evolving their strategy against mighty Russia, and Russia's resources are huge.
Absolutely. Nina, just give me 2 minutes. First thing,
Yeah.
when we look at strategic bombers, they are extremely costly asset. But what is their role? Their role is not to fire air-launched cruise missiles for a ground target, though they are being used like that and like today itself, there were a large number of Tu-95s that flew from Russia and launched air-launched cruise missiles onto Kiev in 9 different regions, spanning from Sumy in the east to Lviv in the west. But
Mm-hmm.
basically, these are strategic bombers because they can do both conventional and nuclear rule. And most of the missiles that they carry are the ones that can also house the nuclear weapons. And that is why they are called as strategic bombers. Now, their role is completely different. Russia has so thousands of other aircraft which it can utilize. To say that in the war effort, these bombers will make a very big difference, I can assure you, no, they're not going to make a very big difference, primarily because, like I mentioned to you, there were 30 or so MiG 31s that were there inside the same
Mm-hmm.
Belaya airfield. Now, there are so many airfields in Russia, and if it uses a fighter or a fighter bomber and launches these air launched cruise missiles from them, he can easily achieve his target or aim. Or he can also launch surface to surface missiles like he's been doing an Orshnik. He's not yet used the Orshnik, which is like a MIRV, multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicle with about 6 warheads on different targets. I mean, and a hypersonic weapon of 10 Mach speed. It cannot be intercepted virtually by any air defense system in Ukraine. So
Nothing that NATO could provide either.
no, now here, right now, it has Arrow 2 or equivalent Patriot systems, and those systems cannot intercept this. It has to be an Arrow 3 or a Plus system that can intercept a hypersonic missile, which nobody has given them. Secondly, the intelligence part. No, they had to have
Yes.
real time intelligence to know when all the bombers will be on ground and lined up like this on the tarmac, like you see when the drone is coming in to hit. And
Yeah.
that can only be provided by two countries, UK or USA. So this
Yes.
implies that either the Britishers had given it. Trump says, I did not know. In Punjabi, they say, मैं सुत्ती पई थी, मैनू नहीं पता की होया. I didn't know what happened. I was sleeping. But yeah,
Yes.
Americans, I mean, the Ukrainians say they had told the Americans that we are going to go and attack in this manner. And
No,
Putin
but the
is,
Ukrainians also said that they didn't inform Trump.
they didn't.
That they did not inform Trump. I've heard that story too.
No, I in the first go when the first news came in, they said they had informed, and maybe under pressure of Trump, they are backing out of it.
Ah,
But
yes.
more importantly, that the Putin is so angry. Imagine one day before peace talks, if Zelensky has to do, he has to be mad because he can never meet Russian strength. And
Yes.
it may look heroic, but remember Japan when it did Pearl Harbor was decimated by the Americans by the
It
time
was.
the war got over. Russia is also going to decimate it, especially if Americans don't help Zelensky. And Trump is only interested in the mineral wealth of Ukraine. He is not interested in Zelensky. He is not interested in Putin. Except that he made a statement when he took over power that in 24 hours I'm going to stop this war, and he's not been able to
He
stop
hasn't been able to do it. Yeah,
in
if I
many
can
cases.
come to you, Bharat Gopal Swami, do you feel that Ukraine? Do you agree with the Air Commodore on this? That this is something that this is like a really a very very high wall that the Ukraine is going to have to climb. It's not going to be able to get past the Russian might, even if the US and the UK are still providing intelligence and support, because everyone is talking about the quadcopters, but I mean, do they really have the ability to change the war on the ground?
You know, I yes, I have to agree with Air Commodore, and I think I agree with this analysis because this is, yes, this may have been a great tactical victory. This may have exposed the Russians and embarrassed the Russians to a large degree. But the reality is, nobody is being able to find a solution to this war for the last 3.5 years, including Biden and including when the US support to the Ukrainians was
Well,
much
Biden
higher.
started the war.
Yeah, Biden started the war, and and like look, the Americans with Europeans have been flirting around with this scenario for almost more than 15 years right now, one way or the other, and this has led to this. This has led to a situation where you know it had to get worse before it gets to any sort of a resolution. Second of all, okay, the Europeans have committed to increase their defense spending in GDP. Europeans have basically sat on their haunches and not really cared about defense and only, you know, um, relied very heavily on the U.S. defense prowess to protect them. Um, they've,
Bharat, if you just wait for a minute.
yeah,
Commodore, are you saying something? 'Cause I can't hear you. Are you talking to us? No. Okay. All right. Yes, please continue, Bharat.
Yeah, the Europeans have committed to increase the defense spending to 3.5% by 2035. Okay, you can increase the spending, you can commit to the spending, but the reality now is how will you increase your defense industrial, your production capabilities, your policies, and alignment of European policies towards fighting a common enemy that is Russia, for them. Like I think Victor Mahbubani points out in his geopolitics is obviously the combination of two words, geography and politics. For the Europeans border Russia, the Americans have that luxury of the ocean. So the Europeans have never really bothered about defense. Suddenly you're in a hurry trying to boost up your defense capabilities. So even if you may achieve tactical victories here and there, the reality is you will share the border with Russia. The Europeans will have to share a border with Russia. It has to be consistently developing those capabilities that can deter Russia enough. Okay, this is something. This is this is something very similar to the Indian scenario. You will be sharing a border with Pakistan for the foreseeable future, no
That's
matter
right. It's all
how
about
strong you may
geography.
get military. All about geography. You may, how strong you may get militarily. It's like there are some of these scenarios that can go wrong and go all right. So the Europe Zelensky may have, yes, surprised the Russians, but and Putin is about to, um, you know, ex- extract his revenge, and for him to keep faith, for him to keep his face, so he will retaliate. And as I said, the next steps, the next few months are really where there are some interest. There is an upcoming NATO summit. Okay, you have to watch the noises coming out of that summit. You have to watch, Trump. Trump in his public statement, he said, "I spoke to Putin, and Putin is, you know, Putin is." In not so many words, is Putin is about to react to this, and he will seek revenge. So Trump has not tried to calm him down or address any of these, to cool the situation down. Okay, so you will have to wait and see what comes out next. And I'm
That's very
afraid
interesting.
the news might
No,
not be
are
good.
you
That's
saying
all.
that the Trump's USA will have to sort of revisit his the Trump Putin alchemy? I mean, or chemistry, basically. I mean, the fact is that they've gone
Yep.
from saying he's their friend to with Trump losing his cool over Putin, and it's not really a smooth relationship. I mean, just Trump is capable of, just like Trump and Elon Musk have fallen out, Trump and Putin could fall out too.
Yes, look, that uncertainty is there. Second, you also have to recognize the US policy making process. There is no process. Okay. There is no
So
process. In the past, sorry.
there's no foreign policy
No,
towards
there is no,
consistent foreign policy towards Europe or Russia.
no, leave alone consistent foreign policy. There is just no policy. The policy, making policy sometimes is a process too. And usually White House would have its, there would be an interagency coordination. You have no idea how what kind of interagency meetings go on, what kind of conversations go on, and then that gets systematically, you at the moment you don't have a national security advisor, you have a stopgap arrangement. It's like almost saying the national security advisor or a secretary of state is a part-time job. So how does that information or policy come to the presidency is? So those checks and balances have fallen apart. Third, all those people who were with Trump in the first administration are nowhere to be seen in his second administration. You have a new gen. They're all considered suspect and hostile because they're all considered close to the neocons. This is the new Make America Great Again crowd, the MAGA crowd, which actually resent everything that the neocons did at one point of time. So you don't know who the personnel is. You don't know how the policy is. You don't know what the process is. So it's at the moment just Trump and Trump himself. So uh, it can be a sunny day today. It can be a very rainy day tomorrow. So
Yeah.
that's the oscillation that you're going. That's what the Europeans and your NATO allies are watching nervously.
Yeah. Amit, if I could come to you, what are the lessons that India should learn? Because India and Pakistan's 4-day war, I don't even know whether drones were used. I mean, there are lots of reports that Pakistan did use drones. Do we need to change, our tactics also? And also, where does it leave India, Russia? Because I mean, President Putin is now due for a visit later this year. I mean, Russia's foreign minister Sergei Lavrov is apparently arriving in Delhi to prepare the ground for that visit, and India continues to buy oil from Russia, refine it, and sell it to Europe. So, how will India navigate this Russia-Ukraine, very very charged atmosphere that seems to be, I mean, it
Yeah.
seems to be having repercussions across the world.
Yeah, see, to answer your first question, what are the lessons for India? I think there are lessons for everybody, including India. What makes these drones deadly, and especially I'm talking about these quadcopters or small drones, is that they're low cost option and they cost you just a fraction of missiles or aircraft, and are yet capable of carrying out devastating attacks, as you saw, right? And there are two ways in which drones can overwhelm the enemy and enemy air defense. One, if you can swarm the enemy's airspace with large number of drones, and then again, which cost a fraction of most weapon systems which they are going to attack, say for air bases or AD, etc. Now, if they manage to take out those sophisticated weapons systems, the enemy suffers heavy loss. And so it is what it essentially does is that you have a very low cost option, and you have managed to extract exact very high damages on your enemy. Now, second, even if 100% of your drones are taken out by enemies air defense, which is very unlikely. I mean, even if you have the most sophisticated air defense, you would hit somewhere about 80, 90%. But even if you hit and take down 100% of your drones, it is still a win-win for the attacking army because it depletes the stockpile of enemies' defense, which are again way more costly than the cost that the enemy had incurred for penetrating those drones deep inside your territory. And then later, once you have suppressed or you have depleted some of the stockpiles of your enemy, and these air defense are very costly. You cannot. You saw the example when you had Iranian missiles strike that were carried out against Israel, and while
That's right.
Israel did take out most of the missiles. There was still that some hit, but it created a lot of burden on the Israeli air defense, and it was largely uncertain if whether in future, if some sort of that attack again happens, will the Israeli air defense will be able to repel those attacks. So this is tactically I mean, even if when you swarm with drones, low cost options, I think it's a win-win in either case, given that. So it's a very uh, there's a lesson to be learned, and it is time for India to invest heavily. And drones come in various shapes and sizes, and so it is very important for India to invest in all sorts of drones, including quadcopters, small drones, and aerial kamikaze. The problem with I would still not say that this renders aircraft redundant at this point of time, because there are some
Mhm.
limitations with drones. Again, they'll have to work in combination with uh, traditional aircraft, something that the defense experts call it MUMT, manned and unmanned teaming, where you
Oh,
have a set of MUMT, MUMT,
I saw that.
manned
Yes,
and
I.
unmanned
Yeah.
seen. Yeah, so there you could have an aircraft, and then you can have a fleet of drones around it, and you can coordinate attacks, and that is something that can be done. And because drones at this still, while they can be effective, though there's some shortcomings with drones, right? They are not as agile as aircraft. They don't have that speed. They don't have the range, and therefore they have to be coordinated. Yes, if you can get close to the enemy target, like the Ukrainians did with the Russians at this here, it can be very effective. But yeah, the challenge is to get them. When they fly, it can be easily taken out. So the challenge is to get them towards the target. Now, coming to the question of how it impacts India's relations with
Russia.
Russia. Yeah, I think at this point of time, what Ukraine has done, it doesn't do so much of a damage or impact the India-Russia relations. India's position will be consistent with what it had been earlier, that both sides should come to the negotiating table. They should talk about peace. This is not an era of war, etc. And mind you, this is the treatment that India itself got when it was engaged in a short conflict with Pakistan, where Russia,
Mhm.
said that both parties should talk and end cessation. So India's position will likely be that. I don't think there'll be much of a problem in the relations at this point of time. And yes, Putin is visiting India soon, and the problem with Russia is that while this war has uh, pushed it closer to China, the thing is that while Russia does benefit from a close relationship with China, that that closeness is also what discomforts Russia a lot. The reason is that Russia does not have any major country that is a partner
It
or
doesn't have
strategic
any
partner.
other lie.
Yeah, exactly. If you remember the foreign policy concept note that it released in 2023, it identified China first and India second as the two
Mhm.
friendly centers of power, global power, right? And although it does have allies such as, North Korea or Iran. The fact of the matter is that they are both pariah states. They are isolated states, and the only state that has a working relationship with both sides, even including Russia and the West, is India. And China itself has its own priorities. So China, while this war has pushed Russia closer to China, uh, this closeness is something which discomforts Russia, and Russia would like to
Yeah.
have a partner in India. Although
Okay,
there will be
that's very well
frictions,
put.
yeah, there will be frictions.
No, that there is friction. Commodore, if I can get you in, could you give us an idea about, Amit's put it very beautifully, saying that, that India should actually take a lesson from this and build on this cheap alternative to the missiles. Although I suppose you can never have, it can never actually be an absolute and complete alternative. What do you say? Do you think that we should learn and adapt? Because I mean, we are virtually for facing a not a two front war, even could be a three front war if Bangladesh gets ups the atom. We don't know.
Nina, there is one very major point that has not been understood, primarily because the practitioners of operational art and warfare consider every weapon system as a mean to utilize to achieve political objectives. It is the political objective which is very important in warfare to achieve. For example, in this case, it was for us to attack the 9 terror training centers and kill about 100 odd terrorists there, based over there. So
Inside Pakistan.
inside Pakistan. Now, when we talk of drones, drones cannot replace tanks, drones cannot replace aircraft, drones cannot replace standing army. And this is a major fault with all those who look at it in terms of only theory. But when you
Yeah.
look at it in practice, everything has a role and place for its operations. For example, a fighter aircraft has flexibility of use, reuse. It can go for long ranges. It can be utilized in one side and switch to the other theater in no period of time. It can be moved from one base to the other, and it also provides air superiority. Drones cannot provide air superiority. So this
No, that's a good point. That's a good point.
basic
It,
under no, just 30 seconds, give me more. The basic point is we have to go for drones. There is no doubt about that. We have to go for drones. We have to go in large numbers, but they have a role to fit in. It doesn't mean that everything else has become redundant.
yes, yes. I suppose it's with every war, there are new weapons that come into play. And
Absolutely.
in this one, it was the drones. It's the quadcopters, which Ukraine used to very good effect against Russia.
Yeah, ma'am, can I just take 30 seconds more on this?
Yes,
Because
please.
this is, it was more like a terror attack, an asymmetric attack. The drones did not fly from Ukraine. They went
They flew
4,000
from within
kilometers
Russia.
transported on road. And they were then used like a weapon system outside the air bases, which already were not protected so well. So there are a lot of things. And like Pakistan sent 600 drones in 2 days. And we were able to neutralize 90% of them with hardly any damage in any of our air bases. Whereas we created a massive damage there. So there is a lesson to learn in everything. We cannot objectify and say that drones are the answer for everything. No, drones have a role to play. We need large number of drones because 10 lakh drones is what China is getting, and they are mostly loitering munitions. And they are also some of them are quadcopters.
No, that's very interesting. What about the Ukraine-Russia peace talks, Bharat Gopal Swami? I mean, Trump, even now, Trump doesn't seem to be actually playing an active role in it because, as you rightly said, he's got one advisor in Steve Witkoff, he's got another advisor, and other people who are not really pushing. But where does that stand? Because Russia's proposal was for the for the all of the land that it wants, called Novorussia, or New Russia. It wants all of this returned to Russia, and it talks about Ukraine withdrawing its troops from the territories which Russia claims, and it doesn't want a NATO presence or missiles or anything of that sort on Ukrainian territory. So is Russia stalling?
Um, I actually wanted to also revisit this point about lessons for India. Okay.
Yes, go
I think
ahead.
I have three major points on it. The first
Okay.
major point is it's a constant reminder of take your security into your own hands, which the Europeans have had a harsh reckoning with. Okay. The Europeans relied far too much on the Americans for their security. And this war, this,
They say now that they're going to increase their defense spending to 5% of their
yes,
defense budget.
yes, yes. And what were they doing all these years? Okay, so
Mm,
they should have realized, they should have known better. Europe, which has strategists like Charles de Gaulle, and which produced great military strategists, now come and say, oh, they, they've been jolted from their
correct.
complacency. Effectively.
Correct.
Second of all, this provides a very valid argument about to those international observers and onlookers when India developed their nuclear weapons. Ukraine
Mm,
voluntarily gave up its nukes away to the Russians. Okay. And if, consider this scenario, if the Ukrainians had nukes, could this have altered anything on the, now, if we are it's an if and a but question, but nonetheless, those people, those arguments which were used at that time for the Indians about to not develop nuclear weapons, maybe this is a useful reminder. The third for me is more of a commercial business arrangement. There are many platforms, both on the land systems and the aircraft systems around the world, which has Russian technology. Today, their spare parts are practically those spare parts and those kinds of replacement. Defense industrial infrastructure is effectively stunned or will be complicated due to international export and sanctions. Would this be a commercial opportunity for India where the Indian firms could get designs and manufacture these in India and serve as a useful export to some of those countries in Africa and elsewhere, wherever the old Russian hardware still remains. Maybe the brigadier, maybe the air commodore knows much more about this. But maybe could this be commercial opportunities for the Indians to do something like this?
No, that's a very
Because those
interesting
broad,
point, actually, Bharat.
yeah. So if this is probably a good time to do it, then that depending on the piece, or look, again, yeah, the U.S. We don't know where the U.S. establishment stands today. There is a lot of uncertainty for both Ukraine and Russia. The best strategy, if I were them, they would want to drag this on and drag the time on because the White House is uncertain. Okay, so the longer they drag this on, and the longer they stall it on, and do a cosmetic of um, cosmetic peace talks. Um, you know, it's not far off. Okay, the next year we have midterms in the U.S. We have to see how the House flips in the midterms. So if once you do those things, you are like effectively in a different political territory where each of them might lobby their way in to get more support from the U.S. Also. I think
So
I'm not very
are you saying that the US would like the war to drag on, unlike
not the U.S.
what
not the U.S. not the U.S. The
the
Ukrainians and the
Russian
Russians.
Ukrainians and
Yeah, the
Russians
Russians.
would both like the war to drag on?
Yeah, yeah. If they can drag this time out, and then you've effectively won, right? So yeah, sure. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting because the way that the Ukraine attack was timed to coincide with the talks the next day on June 2nd in Istanbul was I thought quite an interesting coincidence, if it wasn't a
Yes,
coincidence.
maybe
So
maybe that's the message. Yeah, yeah.
hmm, hmm. Yeah. Well,
Unspec.
Amit,
Yeah,
no, but I mean, also the level of NATO involvement, Bharat, is quite singular. I mean, it's basically a war that's being fought by not Ukraine. It's basically NATO versus Russia. I mean,
correct.
and that's been obvious from day one, right?
Yes,
Uh,
and yes, yes. It's NATO
and
versus
you
Russia.
and Ukraine is struggling because I mean it doesn't have the resources, it doesn't have the manpower, to man the war against the Russian infantry because Russia has got deep resources. Uh, if I can come to you, Amit, would you like to comment on
Um,
that? Do you want to make a final comment? Do you want to make a concluding remark?
no, I think these are this is the reminder was my final comment. Actually, in a way that this is, I think, the
That
lessons that the Indians.
Ukraine and Russia
Yeah,
want to continue the war, and but
I would keep the better way to put it would be drag the status quo, okay, to see
mm,
if there is a better White House political support, um, because that is what I would do if I were the Ukrainians.
mm, okay. And the lesson learned from for India and Pakistan is to
Or most of
India.
India, right? Be in charge of your own security. I think the allies is good, the friends is good, of the partners is good. We may say all those things, but in the real question, it may suddenly these things change because again I keep reminding that geopolitics, because geography and politics, um, America has a luxury that the rest of the world does not have.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Amit, do you have concluding remarks? And then I'll give the last word to Air Commodore.
Yeah, sure. So the pertinent question here is where do both Russia and Ukraine go from here? Now, the Istanbul talks, I mean, to my mind, appeared quite, the two parties came, were not very serious from the very beginning, I would say. Let me elaborate why. So, to begin with, neither side came with the intention of, and this is the second round that I'm talking about, with the intention of ceasefire, building trust towards the beginning of the peace talks. The talks were largely aimed at exchange of prisoners of war and maybe fallen soldiers, right? And I say Ukraine was non-serious. I mean, you would expect that Ukraine to be more serious coming to these talks, but the fact that it was planning an attack for more than 18 months and that it knew that it had to go for the second round of negotiations. And while it
Mm,
was going, it was already planning attack, and it did not stop the Ukrainians from launching the most, I would say, daring attack on the Russian strategic bombers fleet. You would say that Ukraine was not a serious party to this negotiation and this Istanbul talks. Now, they may have yet gone for several reasons, right, to maintain semblance of sanity, or to not blow their cover, or not to raise suspicion, etc. And plus, there were pressure from again Trump. Uh, Russia, on the other hand, again, not very serious when it comes to and it was evident in their demeanor during the talks. First, they did not come out, they did not release the conditions for ceasefire first, and that they rather went to the meeting and then they released the conditions. And those conditions, if you look at it, they do not, they're absurd, right? That Ukraine must recognize Russia's territorial gains, cut its military size, swear neutrality, that means no NATO in future, and recognize Russian as one of the languages, official languages, right? That's quite
Oh
absurd.
yes.
It wants, yeah, it wants
But
Ukraine to
that's also
withdraw.
because in Ukraine, Russian is widely spoken.
Yeah, Russia is, but again, to tell to a country that you must have this particular official
Yeah, I
language, I
suppose.
think it's not Russia's business, right? And it also wants Ukraine to withdraw forces from areas claimed by Russia so far. So a peace
Hmm.
deal could only hold if there's something for both parties in there. But Russia's demand do not leave anything for the Ukrainians, and so the talks were not expected to lead anywhere
So
from the beginning
basically, the
itself.
peace talks were a sham.
Yeah, in my opinion, neither of the two parties seemed very serious about it. Again, as Bharat had pointed out, because it's maybe because Russia thinks that it's already winning, and just a matter of time before it can, make Zelensky submit. And Ukrainians in the thought that maybe if they can delay this, they could get a better deal. In any condition, the conditionalities imposed by the Russians on Ukrainians for a ceasefire and a peace it itself is something which the Ukrainians cannot take very light. At its face
That
value. And
isn't that also, Amit, because the Russians believe that if Ukraine is given a ceasefire, if there is a ceasefire for a one or 2 months, then Ukraine will rearm and reposition itself and start all of this all over again.
quite possible, but that advantage is with both the parties to the war, and even
Hmm.
Russia could assemble a lot of firepower in those 2 months, of ceasefire, if given the wide asymmetry that exists between the two
That's
countries.
right.
But yeah, Russia would want to finish this job as soon as possible, and yeah, not give much of a breathing space to the Ukrainians. Yeah.
Okay. That's very interesting. Commodore, last word to you, because I've been reading up on the subjects which are close to your heart, and we've learned so much. I think in the last week alone about the tactics that have been employed by the Russians, the tactics used by the Ukrainians. And but there is one interesting comment that was made by the U.S. Special Envoy on Ukraine, Keith Kellogg. He has brought up the fact that there is a risk level going up because you don't know what the other side is going to do, and he was basically pointing to the Russian nuclear weapons. I mean, he says, is he right? I mean, is the risk of a third world war a possibility, a nuclear war possibility, because the UK has said it is preparing for one.
Nina, very nicely put across what you have said. The British generals have been telling their political leaders that there's going to be two wars, one China invading Taiwan, and then Russia using that as an excuse and launching attacks on the Baltic countries, Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia. So, very nicely you have put across. And also, very importantly, you mentioned the nuclear weapon. Now, the nuclear weapon thing is such that Russia came out with their new nuclear doctrine in December 2024, and in which they mentioned that if any attacks on their military infrastructure from where response of the weapon systems, which included the nuclear weapons, were affected, such as the strategic bombers, then they had a right to use the nuclear weapons. So that red line has been crossed by Zelensky. Knowingly, it has been crossed so that Russia uses brute force or more force. And also, Zelensky, when he crossed this line, I tend to agree with Amit, that when he says that it was essentially Zelensky who came out and did this attack just one day before so that the peace talks will get scuttled. No peace talks can take place. Imagine you, Pakistan, asking us for a peace talks and then carries out a massive attack on Delhi. You really think that our prime minister will ever think of having any kind of truck with Pakistanis then? Absolutely
Absolutely.
no. So another factor that comes in is that why Russia has not yet used the nuclear weapons, because it knows that moment it uses the nuclear weapons, it gets isolated. And right now, the Europeans, including the British, are very keen that they create such a situation that Russia gets cornered and does something silly so that the entire NATO can then get into the war as per their article. The last thing I want to say on this is if Americans really want to stop this war, they have to stop arming Ukraine. Because
Yeah.
Zelensky right now has less than 20% of popular support. He's ruling on martial law. And the day Zelensky finds peace, he will be out of power and he cannot hack that. So he wants to be seen as a hero who defended till the end.
Well, that's very interesting. So, in conclusion, I would like to say that the drone attack is going to go down in history as one of the most sophisticated covert operations of the Russia-Ukraine war so far. I mean, Ukraine has been outgunned by Russia, but it's made very innovative use of these drones. And it's difficult to come to any conclusion on how much damage Ukraine has really, achieved in this war because, it's shocked us, it's shocked Russia, it's shocked the world. But whether the Operation Spiderweb is going to alter, President Putin's thinking, is going to be interesting to watch because Russia still believes it holds the advantage, and it is a major power. So while the attack is sure genius, no question. I think it's and the fact that Europe's biggest land war since World War II is still unfolding. We'll have to wait and see whether it spreads and whether there'll be repercussions beyond the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Thank you very much, Air Commodore, for all your very interesting insights. Thank you, Bharat Gopal Swami, for your inputs, and thank you, Amit Kumar, for coming on the show with very interesting, insights into Russia's way of thinking. Thank you, viewers, for watching Global Express. Please click on the new Indian Express website and click and share. Thank you. Thanks very much.